Welcome to Beyond the Term Sheet with ACE Alternatives, where we explore groundbreaking ideas and innovations shaping the future. I'm Stephanie von Behr, and today we're asking, how can women drive more innovation in the DACH region? This is not just as a side note, but as a meaningful strategy for growth and resilience. Studies consistently show that diverse teams outperform, yet across the DACH region, progress has been slow, which is why I'm joined by Sabine Flechet and Mascha Bonk. Sabine is co-founding partner at Masawa, the first nurture capital fund backing early-stage European founders in mental health and wellness. With a background in private equity, investment banking, and consulting, she later joined LeadX Capital Partners, building a 70-plus company portfolio at pre-seed and seed stage. Sabine also advises the Purpose Foundation on regenerative governance models. She holds an MBA from INSEAD, co-founded the INSEAD Business Angel Club in Germany, and serves as vice president of La French Tech Munich. Very impressive.
Thanks
Mascha
for having
Bonk,
me.
I'm so happy to have you. Mascha Bonk is chief of staff at Ovom Care, a startup applying AI and tech to improve fertility outcomes. Previously, she was an investment manager at Ananda Impact Ventures following earlier roles in banking and consulting. Her academic and professional journey has spanned 6 countries. Thank you so much both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
So, let's start with a quick reality check. Do you know how many startup founders are women in Germany? Do you have an idea?
Not the majority.
16.
I would say something around, 10 to 15%.
Yeah, so 16%. And in Austria, do you know what the number is?
A bit higher?
No, lower. It's 12%.
Wow. Okay. I thought
And
Germany was actually worst case.
Yeah, we're a little better than Austria, but Switzerland is a bit better than us, and it hovers around 18%. And you know, it's not just founding. Women hold fewer than 10% of partner roles at VC firms across the region. And I promise all you listeners, this isn't going to be a depressing podcast, but we got to talk about the real facts, right? And it means that investment decisions are still made without gender diverse perspectives at the table. And we know that these barriers aren't new. There's gender bias in pitch rooms, smaller professional networks, and less access to capital. But what's striking is the persistence of these patterns, despite the clear evidence that diversity drives more innovation and better outcomes. So Mascha, I would love to know from your founder-operator perspective, what has the journey been for you at Ovom Care? When you think about you're a venture-backed startup in Germany, or at least you started in Germany, how was that journey for you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. To be honest, I would probably differentiate between the journey of Ovom Care and then also my personal journey at Ovom, because they are different stories. I spent the past 3 years prior to joining Ovom at Ananda Impact Ventures, an early stage impact fund based in Germany and the UK. And then I transitioned from my impact investor role into the operator role at Ovom after actually Ananda Impact Ventures was part of Ovom's seed round. So during that time of the seed round, I got to know the founding team very well, got to like them very well, and thought, okay, this is amazing what they're planning to do. And if they're a startup that I want to join, it's them. And I've been playing with the thought of joining a startup already for quite some time. But obviously, I feel like as an investor, you also it's difficult to switch to the operator role because you create this lens of seeing everything that won't work. So then obviously it's difficult to find a startup where you say, yeah, this is something I do truly believe in. This is where I want to join. But therefore, for me, this journey was, I think, primarily driven by the personal relationship that I had built with the founding team during the due diligence process, actually, when I was still on the other side. So I think this is a bit different to put a traditional gender lens on, I would say. However, then looking at the Ovum team itself, the fact is that Ovum was founded by an all-female founding team, which is also, I would say, definitely a rarity. And I think something that we have seen, though, especially in the impact area, going back to the VC side of things again, Ananda never struggled that much compared to other funds with investing in a lot of female founders. And I think this is mainly because Ananda only invested when there was a very clear impact case. And I think oftentimes women who found something found because they are so fundamentally depressed about the status quo, and they are saying, I do need to change something about this. So the likelihood that a woman who found something in a social or environmental area is, I would say, on average higher than men. So this is why, like, in the impact area, the statistics, I feel like at least, look significantly better than outside of the impact bubble, let's call it.
That's a really good segue to you, Sabine, because you do a lot of impact investing.
Mm-hmm.
How are you seeing this? I mean, the example that Mascha is talking about is an all-women, 3 women-led team. So 3 co-founder women. That's very rare. What are you seeing in the impact space? Are you seeing more women? Are you seeing more innovation when it comes to women? Or what are the challenges and opportunities there?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit which type of impact we're looking into, right? But I would kind of agree with Masha in the sense that some impact fields are very woman related because they are dealing with healthcare, because they are dealing with social endeavors, inclusion, diversity, and these are topics that are usually more covered by women because these are like naturally fields where they're very early on worked in or are exposed to with children and etc. But I do think that there is a lack of women in more of the deep tech area around environmental, which is usually also related to the fact that we have less access to STEM or less promotion towards STEM studies across the women population. And therefore, that is something that comes very early on at the education level where we don't see the promotion of women across the board until they get to the deep tech studies and can actually innovate in these fields. So this is kind of where I see a little bit of a push or like something that we should force into so that we can bring more women into these types of studies so that we have actually the same gender balance when it comes to deep tech innovations, for example, where we definitively lack a lot of female leadership in there, especially also in the funding of these startups. So yes, in impact, you will see more women when it comes to social, but then also, and this is where I really don't want to get into is, why do women are more exposed to non-for-profit and philanthropy, which is what we refer to as social impact sometimes, which is wrong because social impact can be for profit. And so this kind of bias around like, okay, women are more interested into social impact because this is something which is more natural to their skill set is completely, sorry for my French, bullshit. And we should probably promote more of different topics at university level or even at primary school as to avoiding this gender bias of having, STEM more masculine topics and then social impact more female topics. And that's what we kind of, I think trying to do when we look at the impact landscapes is to have at least a little bit more balance than in the traditional VC space or traditional VC backed startups.
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you both is that there seems to be like this binary, like it's like the soft skills or the social impact, the nurturing sort of capacities are different or somehow separate from the science and the math, but actually we could potentially build a system of education or a new way of thinking about education that really marries those two things. Because how you see what's happening in the world right now with people like Elon Musk building rockets that have none of the marriage of the empathy and the nurturing. And it's just like, how can we destroy the world as fast as possible so that we can potentially make as much money or just go to Mars so that we don't have to live on our beautiful planet. I mean, I'm simplifying things, obviously, but we do see an example of the other side of this, and it's not looking good. I mean, we can talk till we're blue in the face about how depressing it is with what's happening in the US as an American, where diversity initiatives are being completely slashed. But I do think we should keep it on a positive note because in Europe, I'm really proud and happy that we're here now and we have an opportunity to really ride on the coattails of the fact that the US is saying we're not really going to support any migrants. We're not going to be inclusive in any way. And we can actually, especially in Germany, we can say we're going to actually take all of these talented people, bring them here and build. What do you think about that? Sabine?
Yeah, I do think that Europe has a key role to play in these diversity and inclusion topics and promote a responsible leadership for the sustainability of our planet and our society. So, and definitively here, men and women have both a role to play. It's not just a purely a male topic or a female topic. And as you said earlier, like there are a lot of studies and research that prove that, mixed teams, mixed organizations that promote not only gender balance, but also include neurodiversity, for example, as a key skill set, are more cooperative, are more conducive into generating novel ideas, are more positively impacting the organization, not only internally as like the team well-being, the retention is higher, but also externally with clients, with suppliers, with providing products that have a sense, that have a purpose, right? And so, it's not only just purely male, female, but it's also like including minorities, different backgrounds, different countries, different ways of thinking, different modus operandi. For example, we believe strongly, and there is research leveraging and proving this point, that neurodiverse teams that includes, from ADHD to autism to bipolar syndrome have better successes. And if you look at the most, crazy entrepreneurs of all times, they always were affected by some mental challenges, and they made these mental challenges actually magic. Like it became a skill, and this is what we should promote and like try to kind of be inclusive instead of providing or creating silos between, different genders, different ethnicities, different sexual orientation, etc. I think like having teams which promote this diversity is actually contributing to better outcomes, as you said.
Yeah. Masha, is your team, what is the composition of gender in your team on the whole?
Yeah, I would actually need to think about it for a second. I think it's more or less 50-50 in total. Obviously, on leadership level, it's a bit more female than male. So ultimately, Ovum consists of those two key pillars, right? One is the tech team and one is the clinical team. On the clinical team side of things, it's surprisingly male-led. On the tech side of things, also a bit more male-led than female, but actually a bit more balanced. But then obviously on everything that's kind of like the, let's say, horizontal layer. So everything like, for example, my job, more business, sales, and then leadership, that's more female. So I would say in total, we are more or less 50-50. But honestly, and I think this is something that Ovum can be incredibly proud of, but not only in terms of gender, but I have rarely seen a startup at this stage that is as diverse as Ovum is. So also connected with all the other aspects that Sabine has just mentioned. I think Ovum has really, really done an incredibly job with regard to this. And I think one of the factors that has really been helping is that it was like this from the beginning. So obviously our 3 founders were female. However, we already had a male CTO from the beginning, but also they, in terms of their backgrounds, ethnicities, were different from the get-go. And I think this really, really does help in terms of how then like the next, 10, 50, 100 hires do look like. And I think this is also one of the key struggles that you are having when you are like having, a team that consists of like 20 white men, and then you start hiring that kind of like candidate that needs to be female. And obviously you are frustrated because then maybe you don't either receive applicants, or maybe because the best candidates are just for that position, not female. So I think on that journey, the sooner you start, the easier it is.
I would totally agree with that, because I have a parallel to make with the VC industry. It's very hard for a woman to move into a partner position when you have an all-male team, because this team has been existing for the past probably 5 to 10 years, because it's not their first fund. They've been at it for a couple of number of vintage funds, and they have had their ways of working, which, is natural. But then, it's completely biased to the type of investment decision processes that are male oriented. And when, as a woman, you try to interview with these all male teams, it feels like you're on a different planet sometimes, where you feel like, I'm not sure actually I would like to join that team, because it's a perspective and a view of the world which is completely different from me as a woman who has naturally other potential perspective, right? And I go to another type of parallel, which is if you really want to sell products that are covering and are being directed and catering to the entire population. I mean, 50% of the population is women, so you need to cater to that population too. So and this is something maybe I would ask Mascha, but how do a clinical team, which is all male, advise on a female product? Because this is, for me, also when we look at FemTech and innovations into fields that are women related, and you see all male startup teams, you're like, there is a little bit of a disconnection here. And so I'm always thinking, like, if you really want to serve the entire population, you need also a diverse team that can actually serve that population and include all type of genders, all type of ethnicities, etc.
Yeah, happy to jump on it. I think, obviously for us, the big advantage is that Linnea, one of our founders, the chief medical officer, she is obviously female. And then our clinical and medical director, they are both male. But I also think here, like in terms of product, it really, really does help to have the complementary view and not only one, right? Because I also think that, for example, in fertility care, what we have realized is because we focus so much on the woman as the core patient that sometimes we underestimate, like especially in IVF treatment, the significant power that the male partner brings. Also because like something that you can't underestimate is obviously the emotional involvement of the male partner as well. But then also when it really comes about like making a treatment decision, this is usually like a high financial burden for the couple, right? And here you can definitely see that like this is usually then not a decision that's only done by one, and actually oftentimes still made by the male partner and not the female only. So here, like, this was one of our key learnings as well. Like, we were thinking, oh yeah, fertility care, this is all like females, femtech, whatsoever. Like, almost like interesting to see like that we on the other hand like then tap into the same mistakes, right? But then also I think there was a great example
you made
to
this
see
mistake.
like that it's going
you made that mistake, but you learned, and then you actually figured out that you wanted to have a male perspective in it, which I feel like the male are not yet kind of understanding or acknowledging.
There is, sorry to cut you off. I also think there's an unconscious bias because I have a family member, he's a gynecologist, and I said to him, don't you think it's like, do women prefer to go to you, or if there's a woman doctor at the hospital, would they prefer? And he said, no, actually, many women have told me they feel more, that they trust me more. And I was shocked by this. I was almost like confronted by him saying this so confidently, like, but it is the truth. Like, we live in a bubble. I mean, I don't know if you live in the same bubble as me, but I'm in the diversity space. I was the managing director of Founderland. I'm supporting women constantly for the last over a decade. So I think when you get out of our bubble and you go to the real world, you go to, up north in Greifswald where he's working at the hospital, maybe the women there do feel more safe with a man. So we have to also get rid of our own bias of how could a woman not want to be with a woman doctor? Some women don't. And also thinking about the journey of the couple. But I don't want to stray too far into this topic because I know we don't have that much time left. And I would love to talk a little bit more about the role of community. So we see VCs, all women VC-led firms popping up like Auxo or Rising Tide Europe. And these initiatives are great. And at the same time, many of them aren't the lead investors. They come along for the round, but they're not leading, they're not the lead tickets. How do we kind of plant a flag in the ground and drive more innovation without having lead investors who are women investors or allies who are lead investors? So I'll ask Sabine a direct question on that.
Yeah, I think it's recent, right, that we get this only woman-led VC or even these VC funds investing only in women-led startups. So this kind of community building and gender-specific investment thesis. So you need to wait a little bit that these VCs, these firms build their track record and set up, this flag that you want to plant so that they become credible to the market because they haven't been there so recently. So I think that's maybe one explanation. But on the other hand, I think it's just a waterfall, right? So if you look at the waterfall of capital, how it flows, the last tail is the founders, the startup founders who receive the capital from a VC. The VC receives its capital from an LP, right? Limited partners. And if you are not role models throughout this waterfall, then there's going to be a discrepancy in the way capital flows because then you're going to have this gender bias. And then back to the normal traditional way of investing, you invest into male because they're more numerous, they have had the track record, and you might feel more credibility in this. So you need to break that cycle, and you need to basically have at every single break in the process, every single steps in the process, a woman-led initiative. So you need to have woman-led initiative for startup entrepreneurs. You need to have woman-led initiative for VCs and VC partners, so GPs, female GPs. And then you have to have also woman-led initiative at the LP level. And who are the limited partners? So these LPs investing in female-led VCs. These are family offices, high net worth individuals, pension funds, fund of funds. So you can basically break it down between more of the personal, individual, single family offices and more of the institutional funds. The institutional funds are large asset managers. You're not going to change them until, the next generation comes, I think, because they have a set of checkbox that they need to fill in. And if they're not feeling comfortable about your track record, your investment thesis, you're not going to pass the threshold. But on the single family offices and the high net worth individuals, that's where we can really break the cycle and have actually women investors invest into the funds. But the wealth is not there, right? I mean, I don't want to be to stigmatize or over-exaggerate, but right now, women who can invest because they've inherited, or their husband has some money, but it's kind of rare that you had a female or a woman that has made her own fortune because she's been an entrepreneur, because she had a successful business, or because she's been part of a family business. It's there, but it's rare. It's like a very small amount of capital, but we need more of these women. So we need to also educate women on how to build a fortune, how do you invest, how do you build wealth so that they can also be financially independent and can make their own decision in terms of investment and start investing into female-led startups and female-led VC funds. Unfortunately, there's a natural bias that you invest in what you know, right? You invest in what looks familiar. You invest where you have connection, where you can feel some correlation to what you do, right? And this unfortunately has a natural bias, which is also gender. And so as such, male will continue to invest in male, and then women will start investing in women. But we need more woman capital, woman wealth.
I love what you said about that there needs to be a woman or an ally on every step of the journey to bring in more women, because obviously, like you said, there needs to be benchmarks, and LPs are not going to be investing into funds that support only women if they haven't seen the track record or they haven't had this archetype of a woman becoming a unicorn. I get that. But just to get concrete for our audience out there, how did you do it? How did you get to where you are today? Maybe you can talk about, in broad strokes, community initiatives that you became part of, steps in your career, people that you leaned on to get where you are today. And then I'll ask the same thing of you, Mascha.
So I started my career in a very male-oriented environment. So I'm a bit biased because I took the men's path and I had to be or behave like a man for most of my career at the beginning. So I've done an undergrad, I've moved to London and then started at HSBC in investment banking, did merger and acquisition, so sell side by side mandate. So totally I could only see male on the trading floor or on the investment banking floor, and then moved to strategy consulting, where I was probably also the most senior woman there. What helped me is community like INSEAD, my MBA. I did an MBA in 2009, and that provided a community, a secure base, and women. Because at the end of the day, I also think that you shouldn't go after only women community. We need to bring the men at the table, because nothing is going to change if the men are not acknowledging and changing the same way we are. So I think it's just a kind of a mix of having the right allies, and that can be male and women, secure base that promote you, that are your champions, and then being part of things that elevate you, right? Getting visibility, getting knowledge. And there are quite a few communities or I would say ecosystem, actually, like more knowledge sharing type of ecosystem that women can benefit from, in terms of where do I place my money? How do I invest? How do I get the venture capital basics? How do I get mentorship or grants for women? So all these are just providing the facts, and they help you get quicker, that have the speed of executing. And then, you go up the ladder as anyone else. But I think I don't know if it's a benefit, or I was already in a male environment and I just played the men rule, and then I got into VC. Is it working super well that I would be as a man, I would be at the same? No, I think it's a bit more difficult to build your own VC when you're a woman, because people don't judge you the same way as men. I would think that on our side, when we are presenting, being I'm a startup founder or I'm a venture capital general partner, I think most of the questions I receive are more prevention oriented, so risk adverse.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to protect my money? Versus on the men's side, I feel like they're more promotion oriented questions, right? So are you going to bring me like an upside? So I'm more like valued on the downside, and then the men equivalent will be more valued on the upside. And this is what I found a little bit tragic, to be honest. But, you know, I'm trying to feel that the next generation will be better at this than we are, because they've been from the ground up educated.
Well, I can say that I see your visibility in the ecosystem and I see how you support women. So I think you're already making many women's lives better by what you do, and also for being on here today and talking about it very openly. So thank you.
Thanks.
Mascha, what about you? Same question.
Yeah. Maybe let me just share a thought to what Sabine has said earlier in terms of the previous question, because I really, really do like the cap table perspective, because I think this is something that we do tend to forget about in terms of when we see, for example, let's say 5 years from now, Ovum, crazy exit, obviously, then this will be so rich in terms of the female founder ecosystem. But the reality at this point is probably still that like 60-70% of our cap table is male. And then the question is, where is this wealth actually going back to when you are having a successful exit? And who is then having the money to invest again? And I do fully agree in terms of we need to make women wealthier, but this is also going to take time, right? So I think in addition to this, we not only need to make women wealthier, but we also do need to democratize access to investing. And I think this is already happening in some areas, for example, that you can become active as an angel investor also with 2,000 euro tickets instead of having to spend like 20K, which might be a significant amount of your savings. I think those are the areas where there's so much potential in terms of how can we really accelerate it. Because sometimes I feel like when we are talking about how can we promote women, it's so much about mentorship, it's so much about networks. But then sometimes I honestly feel then like isolated networks are created, and within those networks there's no money, and ultimately you need to go where the money is. So I think this is what would really, really, in my view, move the needle. All right, that was my first thought, just something that I wanted to add. In terms of my own story, so far it's interesting because obviously I'm a bit more junior in my career. When I left Ananda, I was on investment manager level. I was non-partner GP level or anything like this. So far, I would probably see similarities in my journey to what Sabine has been describing in terms of I've also been going down the male route in terms of I've done banking, I've done strategy consulting, I did a finance master and so on. But I've always felt like it was an advantage for me being a woman so far in my career, because there are so many initiatives that are targeted at the fact that I am a minority in the industries that I am in. So I can't say that so far I have been negatively affected by the fact of me being a woman. I think what's very scary to me, though, is this realization of if I decide to have a family at one point, that not only means that I'm a female investor, a female operator, but that also then implies that I'm a mother who is a female operator, female investor. And I think this is honestly something that scares me when I look at, okay, where are we today? Because now looking at my career, I'm okay, so far haven't really myself, only speaking for myself, but haven't suffered from the fact that I'm a woman. Actually felt like I was promoted in very good areas. But this is something, looking at the next 10 years of my career, something that scares me, because I think we are so far away of talking real equality, talking real inclusivity when it comes to motherhood.
That will have to be a whole nother podcast because I have lots of thoughts on that. As a mom of 2 little ones. Okay, to wrap this up, first of all, this has been such an engaging and interesting conversation. I wish we had more time, but I would love to ask you both one piece of advice you would give to someone in the start of their career who was interested in either becoming a founder or an investor in the startup space. I'll start with you, Mascha.
I would probably say seek the uncomfortable in terms of like go out there, speak to people from diverse backgrounds, and really get in the variety of opinions and experiences. Because again, I do feel it's so incredibly important to have your inner circle, the people who are cheering for you. I think you also have to go beyond that to really know what it's like being out there, and actually also to build your network, because this is going to be such a fundamental pillar in terms of how you're going to excel in your future career. So also the broad perspective that you wish for yourself, also do give it to the world, is what I'm saying.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Sabine?
Yeah, I would go with that. Networking is always good because you never know who you're gonna find on your path in your career, and I believe strongly in serendipity, and therefore any new connection is a good one, maybe today, but it could also be in the future. So networking, building a close circle of allies, as Masha said, of ambassadors, champions that are backing you up and who are also your secure base when things are not going the way you expected, right? I'm having, for example, my best friend who is also raising a VC, because we need to share the ups and downs of fundraising and what's going well and what's not going so well in this environment. It can be also a man, and don't get me wrong, but it's also having someone who you can rely on, which is going to be your safety net when things don't go as planned, and can also give you a different perspective and open your eyes on what's out there. I would say for me, networking is quite important. And then experiment as much as possible. A career is not set in stone. You know, when I started, and I'm a bit older than Masha, for me, there was just 2 or 3 paths, and that was it. We're starting marketing, then you would do marketing for the rest of your life. You would start in being a lawyer, then you would be a lawyer for the rest of your life. This has changed completely. You can really bypass, go back and change career all the time. You just need to ask questions and be out there to see what is for you, what you like, what is interesting, and then choose that accordingly. Therefore, I would say experiment being a VC, experiment being an entrepreneur, and then build your own path by connecting with others, getting to know maybe also some more hidden paths that are not taught at school, because school is not only framework that exists to find your career path.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have a growth mindset. My career has been all over the map, and I wouldn't choose any other way. Okay, last question. What is one podcast or book that you're reading or listening to that you would want to recommend?
Oops. So I'm in the mental health space. I am very, very, very keen right now on anything around healthy aging and longevity. I'm listening to a lot of Uberman podcasts. I don't know if you know Professor Uberman, who talks about mental health, well-being, and any kind of biohacking to live longer and healthier.
I hope not Brian Johnson.
But it touches upon nutrition, it touches upon online safety, it touches upon anything around menopause, perimenopause, this topic. It also talks about employee well-being. So it's quite broad. And since this is our focus at Masawa, for me, it's not only a personal interest, but also a professional interest.
Connected with the topic of female innovation, I think I would probably recommend a not so hidden gem anymore, but the Fast and Curious podcast. From Verena Pauster and Lea Sophie Kramer, because I think they touch upon many innovative topics from a very comprehensive perspective, and also themselves really show, at least in the German ecosystem, that like it's possible, right?
Yeah. So true. Okay, ladies, this has been such a fun episode. If you heard something today that resonated, share your thoughts on LinkedIn, tag ACE Alternatives, and let's keep this conversation going. And don't miss our upcoming episodes where we'll be talking to investors, founders, and policymakers working at the frontier of innovation in Europe and beyond. Thank you so much for today.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Masha.
Thank you both.